this is Loving the Spectrum. If you're new to our channel, we put out videos once a week, generally on Fridays, sometimes on the weekends. We cover content based on our own experiences as queer non-binary autistics, and we make this content for other autistics, LGBTQ+ folks, and anyone else that's simply here to learn.
This means that we're happy to interact with our audience members that are here to learn, but we'll ultimately prioritize the voices of those in our communities.
If this sounds like the place for you, then subscribe for more of our content. We're thinking about creating a podcast to upload the same content in another format so that people can listen on the go. So I'm going to be working on that, and hopefully I'll be able to get that up in the next few weeks.
We've also created a link tree so that it's easier to stay connected across all of our channels. If you're able to contribute financially to help support us and the continued creation of our content, you can donate to us directly through our link tree. It'll be the first link when you click on the link tree. Since we are both disabled and unemployed, it is difficult for us to support ourselves, and we are both currently relying on family.
We both really want and need more financial independence, so if you can support us in any way, it would really be greatly appreciated. April is also Autism Awareness Month, so if you can donate directly to autistics, that's the best use of your actual funds.
A lot of autistic people, especially autistic adults, not that autistic children usually have much of a choice, we don't actually support many of the autistic organizations that currently exist, so it's a safer bet just to find autistic creators or small businesses and donate your funds directly to them.
So today's video will be about autistic and ADHD traits in childhood. So we'll be sharing stories from our own childhood.
With all that being said, let's get to the video.
So actually, before we get started, if you haven't noticed already, I shaved my head. That's been fucking great.
Yeah.
I mainly did it for like sensory reasons, like literally because I'm autistic and washing my hair is hard, and literally just having hair is difficult to maintain with like heat sensitivity and stuff, but it's been fantastic. Highly recommend it. Yeah.
I am a little bit jealous because, like, honestly, I would shave my head right now too, other than the fact that it would look like I'm copying them. So I have to wait for a little bit, and then I'll shave my head again. So I think, first of all, just a disclaimer, both of us have, like, kind of spotty memories of our childhood. That is often a trauma response, and autistic children often have just, like, a lot of trauma, just generally in their daily lives. That's not because the world automatically sees that we're autistic and comes at us. It's because we are autistic. Oftentimes, things that wouldn't traumatize a neurotypical child might have a much more long-lasting and traumatic impact on an autistic child. So yeah, a lot of these things are things that we either realized very recently or like are still realizing about our childhoods. I'm currently working with a trauma therapist to like try to piece together more of a timeline of my childhood and everything. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind for the rest of the video.
Yeah, so let's get started. For me, one of the first things I was thinking of was food, because like there are a lot of like traditional ideas of what like a picky eater is, and you're like, oh, like especially for like young white kids and stuff, like the assumption is like, oh, you just eat mac and cheese or chicken nuggets and like you have like 2 or 3 foods and then that's it. And like that can be true for a lot of people, but also like for me, those are things I might be doing now. Like in one of our previous videos, I talked about food hyperfixations that showed up for me more in adulthood, but they didn't show up for me in that specific way in childhood because I didn't know how to ask for what I wanted.
Yeah,
because
you simply weren't given the opportunity to have food hyperfixations.
Yeah, because I didn't feel like it was okay for me to ask for what I wanted. I didn't feel like that was okay. So for me, like my food stuff showed up more in like if I had a plate of like the main course and like 2 or 3 different like sides or just different types of food on the plate, I would just eat one at a time. I didn't care if they were touching, but like I wouldn't be going from chicken to salad to back to this and that doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to be going between all the different things all the time. Like I might have like a bite of the different things here and there if I really want to, but like that was rare. Like I would generally, like especially when I was younger, I very much went from one food to the next, and my family always made fun of me for it. Every time, like especially when we were around other family, they would always be like, oh, ha ha ha, like there goes Autumn eating one food at a time again. Like, why don't you just mix it like the rest of us? It tastes so good. And I would just be like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, why? Let me just eat my food.
So I definitely had hyperfixations on food as a child that were like very, very consistent and prevalent. My huge one was just like those little mandarin oranges. Yes, those little mandarin oranges. I remember one of my aunts used to just get me a crate of them every Christmas. And I'd like see it from across the room and I'd be like, fuck yes, my oranges. And then I'd like go up to my parents and bargain with them and be like, can I have 2 before dinner? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And then I'd, have more than that. But yeah, I could literally just eat, I could live off of just those little mandarin oranges. Why am I having such a hard time with that word today? I remember my dad always telling me that my body wasn't gonna like it if all I ate was mandarin oranges. Like, if I hadn't, he was like, limit it to under 10. And I was like, that's bullshit. I'm gonna eat the entire crate tonight. And he was like, your stomach is gonna hate you. And it never did. So I was right. Yeah, that's that. Yeah. And then the other one that my family joked about a lot was just like exclusively bread and jam. And that phase lasted at least 6 months, probably longer, where I just didn't want anything else. And then my Subway order through my entire childhood was just the plain white Italian bread with mustard. That's it. That's all I wanted. And the Subway person would always be so confused. They'd be like, you don't want any like turkey on it? I'd be like, no, mustard. And then, they'd be all confused as to what to charge us and everything. But I love that shit. I don't know. I don't think I could eat it now, but I loved it as a kid. Yeah. I'm really curious to see if like sour and bitter things, especially for autistic kids, is like a sensory seeking thing. Cause like
I've always loved straight sour
lemons.
Candy.
Yeah, sour candy, just straight lemons. I didn't like limes as much, but straight lemons, and then. Yeah, whatever the fuck I was just talking about. The fucking, the mustard. Yeah. That's weird. No, Anyway, I always described my relationship with food as just like a general apathy towards food, and that was very consistent from, early childhood onward. I still don't really like food. Yeah.
I had such a hard time with like taking medications. Could not swallow pills. For a long time, I like was able to get really good at it.
Recently,
I'm like,
got good at it, right?
Yeah, I like got good at it again, like very recently.
In the last year or so.
Yeah, and that was only because I had to start taking meds recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, like especially with like liquid medication, if I had the flu or something, I would just be like inconsolably just sobbing. Like smelling it would literally just make me want to throw up. It was just so awful.
Clothes is the next category. I definitely had a lot of different sensory issues with clothes as a kid. The pretty standard ones, like tags. I had to regularly have all my tags cut off clothing. I still do that.
Yeah.
It helps so much. Like, why not? If there isn't very, very crucial information on the tag, then why keep it? And then, wool was a very big trigger in terms of fabric. I just like could not handle straight wool against my skin. If I have a layer in between, that's like doable-ish on like a good day. And that's something that's carried over to my adulthood too. But yeah, I remember as a kid like putting on a wool sweater for the first time and immediately like just having to like rip it off and feeling like I needed to rip my skin off also because I still wasn't comfortable even remotely. And that was terrible.
Yeah. No, it's funny because like when I first think about clothes, I'm like, oh well, like I never like remember throwing a fit or stuff when my parents would make me buy stuff or put stuff on. Because I feel like, as far as I know, I never really threw tantrums, and I think that was very much like I learned that doing that made me a bad child, and I didn't want my parents to not love me.
Yeah.
And I learned that very quickly, so I never really did anything growing up.
Yeah. And that...
And, like, specifically when it came to clothes, like, I would be like, okay, yeah, like, I'll get this, even though, like, I knew I would never wear it. I'm like, and I remember so many times I would be shopping with my mom, and I would be like, this isn't fully comfortable, I don't think I'll wear it. And she's like, no, but it looks good. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to wear it. It's not comfortable. She's like, oh, no, I want to get it anyway. And I'm like, you are wasting your money. I'm not going to wear this. It's not comfortable. Like, there were also a lot of gender things in that, too, because she almost always just wanted me to dress as feminine as possible. But, like, even just with the feel of clothing, like, if it just felt off, I wouldn't be able to wear it.
Yeah.
And, like, even with uniforms, I remember those just being the worst. I always hated, like, our pants. Especially, like, when I went to high school, we had these, like, just awful stiff pants. And everyone, or, like, a bunch of the girls anyway, started wearing yoga pants instead. And everyone just assumed it was, like, because we wanted guys to look at our butts. And it was just so ridiculous, for one, because, like, those pants were so uncomfortable. Like, yeah, that stuff was so ridiculous. I even remember literally going to the bathroom at school and, like, taking off my clothes in the stall and just, like, sitting or standing for a bit to just, like, not have any clothes on and just, like, have, like, for one, like, time away from the class and just being, like, auditory, like, overstimulated and just it being too loud. But then just, like, visual, just everything. I just would literally go to the least frequently used bathroom and just, like, get down to my underwear in the bathroom and literally just, like, sit for a few minutes and then go back to class and be like, I'm not disabled. I'm
fine.
fine.
Yeah.
Like, no, that should have been a sign. But yeah.
Another thing with clothes is just, like, very specific clothes that you wear repeatedly. I definitely have gone through many different phases of that. Like, my Adidas track pants phase lasted, I don't know how long, until I met them and they taught me how to dress a little bit better and I learned how to dress in a way that makes me feel gender euphoric rather than gender apathetic.
Yeah.
And that's made a really big difference. And now I just have different go-tos and go-tos that make me feel even better with myself, which is really nice. But yeah, just having, like, if you find one piece of clothing that, like, doesn't trigger any of those gross sensory feelings, it's very, very common to latch onto that piece of clothing and just, like, exclusively wear that.
And, like, that can be hoodies for a lot of people. Like, especially because there's so many trans autistic people, like, hoodies are a great go-to.
Yeah.
Hoodies, flannels, like, that's, like, stuff, especially I find, well, for me, I definitely prefer looser fitting clothing to tighter fitting clothing, because I know that's definitely a difference between some people. I know some autistic people definitely prefer, like, tighter fitting and, like, literally needing the pressure and stuff. I definitely don't, like, especially around the waist, which is hard, because, like, body-wise, I feel way more comfortable wearing, like, high-waisted things. But, like, sensory-wise, I hate having stuff around here, which is why I like dresses, but then sometimes those are too feminine, and it's just, like, finding the mix between what's comfortable sensory-wise and, like, what feels comfortable gender-wise is very hard.
Yeah, no, I was going to add to that. Obviously, I didn't have this as a kid, but binders now are such a difficult thing to choose, because, like, when I originally realized that I wasn't a woman, my dysphoria, once I was able to articulate my dysphoria and pinpoint the specifics, it just, like, came to the forefront a lot more, and I pretty much needed to wear my binder daily, just to be at a, like, mentally okay level, and then, like, as my mental health stuff changed and different things took priority, my sensory stuff became way more important than my gender dysphoria. And so now I'm kind of in that weird state where, like, sometimes my gender dysphoria is more important than the sensory stuff, but then I have to, like, I don't know, just, like, wear it for way less time, because then just the tightness will start to mimic an anxiety feeling rather than, like, a comforting I'm wearing my chest binder feeling. It'll mimic the, like, I can't breathe anxiety feeling, and then if that starts spiraling before I notice, it's not good. So yeah, I have to just be much more aware of how I'm feeling when I wear my binder now, which is a little frustrating. But yeah.
But yeah, like even just like going back to childhood stuff, like I used to be on a swim team for years, and I was always literally the last person out of the change room. My parents were always so annoyed with it, because like, especially if my sister and I were swimming at the same time, she would get out like half an hour at least before me. So
yeah, I was the
like
same way
I would always be like,
too.
why can't I get dressed faster? I feel like I'm doing everything quickly. It's not like I'm just standing around, but like I literally would just stand around and wait for myself to dry, but I would be like walking around and being like, oh no, I'm doing my skincare routine. Oh, I'm
possibly move
checking to make sure none of my teammates left anything around. Oh, I'm just checking to make sure everyone's doing well, or I'm just chit-chatting and stuff, and be like, oh no, I just forgot to start getting changed. Yeah. Meanwhile, I was just waiting for my body to air dry, because I hate towels and I hate just being wet and the process of getting changed while being wet. So I would just take so much longer than everyone else, but it was like because of sensory stuff. It wasn't just like...
Yeah. And that ties into the next point, which is hygiene. You have talked a lot about how showering and just being wet has been a huge barrier.
Awful.
Yeah. I definitely, like, I remember early on in childhood, I was very, very resistant to baths. Who knows if that was specifically an autistic trait or just a general, like, childhood thing. I crave the dirt. I don't know. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, toothbrushing was something that was specifically, especially once I started losing teeth, and like, the first time I lost a tooth, or the first time I had a wiggly tooth, I'm not sure what specifically, but I remember going to brush my teeth, and the feeling of the toothbrush against the tooth that wasn't solid in my skull was just like the worst thing I have ever experienced in my goddamn life. And from that point on, it was kind of like in my brain, I gave myself a pass from brushing my teeth whenever I had a loose tooth, or whenever I had like a gap in my teeth with just like that weird mushed flesh that wasn't yeah, it's gross as shit. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No autistic traits here, anyone.
Disgusting. So I would just, like, I remember going to the bathroom and wetting my toothbrush, because my parents would go in and check to see if my toothbrush was wet, see if I brushed my teeth, and I'd be like, joke's on you, I just fucking ran it under the tap, and then I got made fun of for having really yellow teeth, and then that was a whole other thing. But yeah, toothbrushing was a huge sensory nightmare for me. It still fucking is. Like, even, the flavor of the toothpaste can be a really, really big barrier. If it's like, when I started using adult toothpaste and I realized how much more aggressively minty adult toothpaste was, I was like, what the fuck is everyone doing?
Yeah, I want to go to Walmart and
get
like check out the kids' toothpaste, because I saw TikTok about that recently, and I'm like, oh my god, I can get like a good flavor. Oh my god, like maybe that. So I want to check that out.
Or something.
Well,
No.
Not for me anyway.
I remember my sister used to have a cinnamon one.
Oh, sorry, that's just so.
Okay, what do we move on to the next topic? Communication. Non-verbalness is a good place to start, because you've had a couple instances. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, if I have had non-verbal episodes, I don't remember them yet. We'll check in if anything comes up in the future, but
yeah, I'm still trying to like understand like the right like terminology to use, and even just like really trying to understand my own like memories and stuff properly, and like what's currently going on right now, and trying to figure out the level of verbalness I have, because I know when I get like very stressed or anxious or overtired, it can feel like very exhausting to talk, and like not necessarily to do other things. Like I can like listen and I can like nod along and like want to like participate and stuff, but like the act of literally speaking just feels like there's something literally stopping me from doing it. Like, I can try really hard to, but it's just like I can feel the drain coming out like so much quicker than anything else would take out my energy. So like even just like last week we were really busy for a couple days, and then as soon as we finished our last task and got home and I was lying in bed, I was literally like, I can't speak anymore. Like, I want to keep hearing your story and I want to keep listening, but like I can't speak. And like it was so hard. I don't even remember how I even got that out, because it was so hard to speak at that point. But like I was still up for like another couple hours or something. Like I was still up for a while, like on my phone or just like hearing them talk, but I like couldn't talk. And like those are definitely things that like were easier to ignore when I was like living alone and not having someone to talk to. But like being like just like being able to like talk that stuff out more and like figure out where that's coming from.
Or not talk it.
Or like not talk it out. Talk it out after the fact, maybe. But yeah, like I even remember having this one instance in my childhood where I'm pretty sure I was nonverbal. I honestly want to ask my parents about this because I can't, or I want to ask my dad about this because I can't remember exactly what happened. But I literally have this photo that I'm gonna add it into this video, of me literally definitely having a meltdown, and from my memory it was a nonverbal meltdown where I literally couldn't talk to communicate what was happening. But I was supposed to be having this like dress up day at school, and I was like just wearing this, like I wanted to wear this purple dress and like my silver tiara, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember which one it was. It was like the silver tiara versus the gold tiara. I had two tiaras and there was one that I wanted to wear. And like I had planned it out before, like ahead of time. And for whatever reason, I don't know what happened. Like, I'm not sure if it was broken or if there was like a specific reason that I couldn't wear it, or if it was literally just my parents being like, no, we want you to wear this one. But for whatever reason, I was being told to wear the other tiara that I didn't like and I didn't want to wear. And I remember just being like so upset and like not being able to communicate that to them. And literally they like left my room, and I had a chalkboard in my bedroom, and I literally drew the tiara on the chalkboard and drew like a massive circle with a line through it. And like that was me trying to communicate, like I really don't like.
You were like sobbing at this point, right? You were still,
I don't remember enough, but like
okay, yeah, fair.
What I do know is that like my parents just took a photo of it and then put it in a photo album. And then like
referenced it as like a funny story.
Referenced it as like a funny story later of like, haha, remember when you were like all upset about this tiara? Ha ha ha, here's this photo in a photo album. Like, I don't know, that.
Yeah.
I need to like talk to them about that. But like, I was going through photo albums after I got all my stuff from my parents' place after cutting off my mom, and I was like going through photo albums to just like try and bring back some old memories and stuff. And I just like saw this one photo and I'm like, I do not remember being able to talk and like communicate what was going on there. And like I just remember like that the photo specifically just being very traumatic.
Yeah, and the chalkboard was the only way you could think to communicate. Which that seems very fucking clear to me. Like drawing a tiara with a circle and a line through it, that seems pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Like, you did a good job of communicating your needs, and it's your parents' fault for not responding.
Yeah.
Fucking bullshit.
Yeah. I want to figure out more about what happened, but yeah, it's like interesting trying to like piece together more of like the communication stuff. Yeah, what about you for like communication?
I was just a very, very inquisitive child. Why was like my favorite question of all time.
That's a big autistic thing.
Yeah. I had to know the why of everything, and that definitely pissed off some of my teachers. And then it had polarizing effects on my teachers. It was either the teachers got very annoyed with me and didn't like me, or they thought it was really cool that I was asking questions, and I immediately became the teacher's pet. There was like no in between. It was very confusing. In terms of not like outward communication, but like people communicating things to me, I very often just did not get shit at all. A really, really common thing, like common enough that my family used to joke about it a lot, was anytime I was in like for example, if we had a family dinner, and a bunch of my parents' adult friends were over, my random comments about conversations, my like more often than not just like observational comments as a 3 or 4 year old or whatever, were usually taken to be jokes, because like whatever I was saying was funny, but I wasn't intending them as jokes. I was intending them as like a thoughtful comment. So when the entire dinner table of adults erupted in laughter, I always interpreted that as them laughing at me because I'd said something stupid, instead of them like thinking what I'd said was funny and interesting. So like routinely I would say something, the adults would laugh, and then I would immediately burst into tears and like run from the room and like go hide under my covers in my bed. And it was like routine enough that like my sister would like roll her eyes and be like, oh god, I gotta go get Aravis again, go back into the room, be like, they weren't laughing at you, they were laughing at what you said because it was funny. And I'd be like, well, are you sure? And then, you know, have to get coaxed back out into the room, which was always its own thing, because then I'd just be embarrassed for misreading the situation, and then embarrassed for crying in front of everybody. So it was like, I could never fucking win. Yeah, I can't think of too many other communication specifics. Mostly, honestly, I was a very, very...
Sarcasm.
Oh, sarcasm!
We both like...
Oh my god.
Like a lot of... like a lot of autistic people did not immediately understand sarcasm.
Yeah.
Both of our dads, however, great at it,
yeah.
Which is how we learned.
Yeah. So, my family dynamic in terms of humor, my dad is really, really good at sarcasm. My mom, who has many of the exact same autistic traits that I do, but is not autistic, did not get sarcasm at all. And that, so it would be like, my dad would say something and then he'd get that glint in his eyes waiting for her to like either get it or completely miss it. And then, so the way I learned sarcasm was kind of seeing it as a game between my parents of like, if my mom got it, she'd be like, I got you on that one. And then they'd kind of laugh. And if she didn't get it, then he'd be like, haha, I was being sarcastic. And then she'd be like, god damn it, like, stop it with all the sarcasm. So like, I found a lot of joy in figuring out kind of the rules of sarcasm and what made it funny. So yeah, that was a big, like, definitely a hyperfixation for me as a kid on a specific area of communication, was just sarcasm and being funny with sarcasm.
Yeah.
And I'm going to carry this on into friendships because this ties in great. That was actually my current best friend, Lauren. That was one of our first bonding experiences, was like me saying sarcastic shit and her having like a complete blank face, clearly didn't get it at all. And then I'd laugh and explain it to her. And then we'd both laugh because she'd be like, oh shit, that was funny. And then like as we went, she'd like get better and better at sarcasm. And then, yeah, we were just, yeah, it was great. We bonded over humor, and that was one of the big foundations of our friendship, and it still is. So yeah, that definitely was a great life skill. So thanks, Dad, for that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about some of your friendship stuff?
Yeah. Honestly, like as we mentioned earlier, I do not remember a lot of my childhood. Like, I do not remember anything about having friends until 4th to 6th grade. Like, I know I've, like, looked at yearbook photos, and my mom was, like, pointing to people and been like, those were your friends. And I'm like,
were they?
I have no idea who those people are. Like, I literally do not remember any of that. Like, I like, will look at old photos and I'm like, I don't remember that at all. And it's weird. And, like, even just, like, getting into, like, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, like, I did not have an easy time making friends at all. Like, I went to a Montessori school at the time, and they had all the classes with, like, 30 kids, which is, like, a standard class size. But then instead of them all being your age, they would have 3 grades within the class. So then there would only be 10 people my age. And then only half of them would be girls. And because, like, all friendships were pretty much, like, your friend group was pretty much the people of your age, of your gender.
Yeah.
Of your gender or whatever.
Middle school friendships used to go.
Yeah, so, like, because at that point, as, like, an AFAB person, I'm like, okay, so me and the other 5 girls are friends. So those are my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then every day at recess, we would be, like, mid-conversation, and then they would just run away from me. And then at first, I remember I would, like, try to run to catch up with them, and then they would just run away again mid-conversation, and every time they would be like, oh, we don't know what happened, you just, like, we lost you. And I'd just be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I remember at some point, like, I would, like, also because my heat intolerance was so bad, I could never, like, run or, like, do, like, heavy physical activity once it was hot outside, because I just literally felt like I was going to pass out, so I could never really keep up with a lot of those sports. I never really did well in any of that. So I remember literally because people were always freaking, like, running away from me, I was like, okay, whatever, I guess I'll hang up by myself. And there was, like, this one tree at, like, the way back of the playground, and I saw, like, there was, like, an area in the roots that I would just, like, dig at with, like, some sticks as I would just sit in the shade, like, the one spot of shade in the area, waiting to see if I could see my friends again, as they had just been running away from me. I, like, started, like, digging up this, like, tire that had been completely buried under the ground, and I'd gotten ditched and left so many times that I had dug out an entire tire from the ground.
So you didn't have a concept of time, but you could be like, it has been a tire's worth of digging since I had friends.
Yeah.
Fucking brutal. My friendships, from, like, an external perspective, I did pretty okay. Like, from my parents' view, from, like, kids in my class's views, I was like, I had friends kind of thing. But I've realized that the biggest thing about that was my ADHD manifested in a lot of just hyperactiveness, and so I channeled most of that into sports, and specifically soccer was my biggest special interest as a kid. And that was pretty much how I made friends, was through the shared interest of being active and doing sports, and that, like, if you have heat intolerance and you can't fucking do sports, that just nixes, like, an entire avenue of, like, of play and bonding with other kids. And
then the one sport that I could do was swimming, and I liked doing swimming initially. Like, I liked swimming in the sense that I liked being in water, because I would go under the water, and then it would be, like, no sensory stuff.
Yeah.
But then once I joined a swim team, it was like, go faster! Like, go longer! Let's do 7 practices a week. Let's make you wake up at 4:30 in the morning.
The competition
and
of it, too.
do competition, and, like, doing, like, whistles and stuff. And, like, swim meets were the absolute worst. It would just be so loud, and, like, that's when it was very obvious, like, who your friends were. And I was always just so overstimulated that I just wanted to have headphones in and just, like, sit. And then I just never had any friends, because, like, I was always way too overstimulated at all the practices to, like, want to be able to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
Like, it just sucked.
Yeah, so I was saying, the biggest way that I, like, I guess made friends in terms of playing around at playgrounds, at least, and like, recess at school, was just people would gravitate to me because I'd be playing with the sports equipment, and then they'd be like, oh, I want to play too, and then it would just go based off of that. But in terms of, like, actual friendships, I pretty routinely only had, like, one close friend at a time, and it's interesting that I, like, now that I lay out this pattern, because it was always, like, my sports friends I never really saw outside of school or the sports team or whatever organized thing we were supposed to be at together. But then I always had this one friend on the side who was like my main best friend, and our main bonding thing would usually be around, like when I was a young child, it was mostly around imaginative play. Because I was very, very imaginative, and I loved just like playing pretend. Like my best friend Kat, growing up in California, that was our biggest thing was just fantasy play or whatever. And then when we moved to Vancouver, like my closest friend at the new school was also like, we'd go off into the forest and pretend to be pirates or whatever, and that was our thing. And so that was pretty consistent. Yeah, all the way up until now, I guess. I don't fucking know. Lauren's pretty much my best friend still, and that's, yeah. So because of the way that I was able to connect to other kids through sports,
Through your special interest.
Yeah, through my special interest, which was sports. I was very lucky that was a special interest. And this gets into our next point about special interest. You planned this really well. It ties in so cohesively. Thanks. But yeah, so because especially as a small child, I was so hyperactive, and my main special interest was soccer, that allowed me to make friendships. But then...
Mine, however, did not allow me to make friends. My first special interest was like watching medical surgeries on TV for like 8 hours straight. How did no one
realize
notice that? Like, I was like,
yeah, and not like medical shows, like actual surgery.
Like
videos.
This was literally just whatever station would just be like, and this is how to do a hip replacement. Like, just like...
Yeah, like actual videos of surgery.
This wasn't like Grey's Anatomy. This wasn't coolest accidents in the ER. How to recover from a shark attack. No, it was like, this is how to take out a gallbladder. Like,
You're so
that
cute.
special interest died at 13.
Yeah.
I was under 13 for multiple years. Just sitting there, just watching this,
and it died at 13 because.
And it died at 13 because then that's when my OCD really kicked in with like the bodily harm intrusive thoughts. I realized it was a combination. I realized literally like a couple days ago that it's a combination of that, and I learned what the cost and the time period of medical school was.
And you were like, fuck.
And I was like, oh, you want me to wait till I'm like 30 or something to like know what's going on? No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to do a quick run through of all my special interests. So Joan of Arc was like a fucking massive special interest as a kid, and I don't know, it's really interesting. I have a massive fire phobia. It was way worse as a child. I don't know if that came from my Joan of Arc special interest because she was burned at the stake, or if my Joan of Arc special interest came from me being like, oh, feels like she would relate to being terrified of fire. I don't know. Either way, Joan of Arc, obsessed with that shit, obsessed with like knights in medieval times and stuff. That carried on well into my teen years as I eventually went on to teach sword fighting and archery to kids, which was great. And then, let's see, Star Wars and Harry Potter were two massive ones as a kid. Harry Potter was also a pretty long-lasting one. Just want to establish, fuck J.K. Rowling, huge transphobe, piece of shit.
Yeah.
Harry Potter on its own, yeah, you could still dissect it and pull out all the anti-Semitic shit and everything.
Yeah.
While also maybe enjoying the nostalgia. I don't know. I still haven't found where I sit in all of that yet.
I personally had a Harry Potter musical as my special interest.
Yeah, they just skipped Harry Potter altogether
Never
and went
Harry
straight
Potter.
to the parodies.
Never really Harry Potter. I think I've watched the entire series maybe twice. Never read the books. I read the first one once, and that was just because I really wanted to, like, this one summer I was like, I'm going to read the books that people have been telling me to read. And then I was like, not worth it.
Yeah, fair.
But no, like, a Harry Potter musical was literally a huge special interest. For years. I was obsessed with it. I did, like, a claymation of them in 8th grade.
That's
adorable.
So fun. Yeah. Yeah, so then generally just reading was a huge special interest for a while. It didn't kick in until I was 7 or 8, I want to say, and for a while my mom was worried because I like didn't show any interest in reading whatsoever, but that was just because I was so aggressively ADHD that I couldn't sit still for long enough. And then once I started being able to kind of temper my my attention deficit stuff a little bit more, I think. I figured out how much I could hyper-focus on books, and because of my imagination, I was able to just completely immerse myself in them, and that became a really big coping mechanism for sensory overload. 100%. I would bring books everywhere. Harry Potter specifically was definitely like a coping mechanism because it was predictable. Like I'd read all the books enough times that it was a comfort thing at that point, and like I could bring it to a new place and be like, okay, when I'm overstimulated, I have this as an excuse. I can tap my dad on the shoulder and be like, hey, I'm gonna go off and sit in the corner and read. And that helped a lot. I think it also was a little bit of a detriment when it came to making friends at school and stuff, because I would like, you know, at any opportunity, I'd finish my work really quickly and then I'd just go off and like sit in the back and read because I wanted to read so bad because I loved the worlds I was being immersed in. Yeah. But then, yeah, on the other side, the few friends that I did make, they were like very, very bonded friendships because we bonded over the imagination and the love for like books and stuff. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.